I want to talk for a few minutes about a blended approach to mission. And I began to talk about this a couple of months ago, and I hope it will help to provide some clarity for us. When we discerned our church vision a couple of years ago, that God is calling us to turn our church community inside out, it was clear that the priority was going to be mission. And although we gave some examples of what we thought that mission would look like as the vision began coming to reality, we didn't define what our understanding of mission is. We're going to do that a little bit in a few weeks' time in our sermon series as we look at the 5 marks of mission. We've experimented with various things over the last couple of years, missional communities and high street market stalls and superstars and Deaf Cafe, and we've got an international cluster and our seniors umbrella group and so on. And all of this alongside our existing cell groups. And I'm aware that that can all get quite confusing. And people have been asking great questions, why isn't Superstars a missional community? Or is Superstars a fresh expression of church in its own right? Or what's the difference between a cluster and a missional community and an umbrella group? And at one level, the difference is, and what we call these different things, the name doesn't matter at all, does it? What's important is what actually happens through the work of those groups. And those are all groups focused on a particular mission, but there are different ways of doing mission. So years ago, when many more people in our country had a Christian background or upbringing of some sort, event-based mission was very popular and successful. So you'd get a Billy Graham or someone else to come along and do a big preach and evangelistic call. We'd invite our friends and people would make a commitment. And that was event-based mission. But then, as fewer and fewer people have had a long-standing background in Christianity or much knowledge of Christianity, it's been recognised that actually coming to faith is a process. So it's not just an event, it's a process. And that's where alpha courses and the like came into being, to recognise that it takes time for people to decide whether or not they want to follow Jesus. And nowadays, it takes years very often between people first hearing something of the gospel message to deciding they actually want to follow Jesus. So even a 10-week alpha course isn't anywhere near enough to help people in this process of coming to faith. And these days people aren't just interested in whether Christianity is true, they want to know whether it works, they want to know what difference it makes. And the best apologetic for conveying whether Christianity works and the difference it makes is actually the Christian fellowship. And that's why it's so good to be praying for our unity earlier on. That's why Jesus prays for our unity. That's why it's been right that we've worked on being one big church family together, and we've been doing the Go Dining together and so on, and we're working on our pastoral care. That's not about being introspective, that's about making sure that the quality of life that we have as a Christian community really demonstrates visibly to a watching world the difference which only Jesus can make in our midst. But this phrase, a blended approach to mission, what do I mean by that? Well, I want us to recognise that mission takes different forms to reach the many different subcultures that we have in our society these days. One size doesn't fit all. We need lots of different shapes and styles of mission to help us reach the myriad different groups that we have in Shirley, let alone Southampton, let alone before we think about our global responsibilities as well. And so the model that I found helpful over these last few months is in picturing 3 different ways of doing mission. And so if we've got a church community like us, based in a building like us, one model of mission is to say, come and see what's going on. And we're inviting people to us, and that's where we have an alpha course, or we put on a carol service, or something like Superstars, or that's the model of mission we're using. We're inviting people to come to us. And when people come in for a baptism service, or just because they're in the area and they know we're an Anglican church, that's all attractional mission. And I never cease to be amazed by the number of newcomers and visitors we have, Sunday by Sunday. A constant stream. And that's a mission opportunity for us, every single week. But of course, Jesus also told us to go and tell. And so we want to go out into our homes and our workplaces through the week and to be building up relationships with people where they are and praying that God would open doors for the gospel message. And sometimes we do that together, sometimes we do that individually. So the missional communities and other mission groups, they're doing that together. So when the Beacon runs a brunch or a Cap Money course, or when All Sorts run a family film afternoon or a fireworks night, that's seeking to build friendships where people are and praying that God would open doors for the gospel message. And then when he does, probably inviting people back to an Alpha course or something similar. And that, some people call it's a sort of go and then come back sort of model. So we're going out to where people are, and then we're inviting people back in to follow up those conversations. Some people call that an engaged model of mission. It's like Joe Sweetnam or Mike Smith running the Alpha course in their workplaces, meeting people where they are, helping share the gospel, and then encourage them to be part of local churches. But sometimes it's not going to be appropriate to bring people back to the local churches or the local expressions of church that we've got at the moment. If we share the gospel with someone who's got very little English, coming to a 10:30 service here or an 8:30 service down the road isn't really going to work for them. And likewise, if we share the gospel with someone who works every Sunday, or someone for whom this building or our style of worship just doesn't connect with them at all, actually it's a real barrier to them. And so that's when we get a sort of go and stay type model of mission. Some people call it an emerging model of mission because new forms of church emerge out of that, which look quite different to how we're used to doing church on a Sunday, but which are equally valid ways of doing church. And so that's why we'd love to do something on the high street, to develop a completely new form of church which meets on the high street. And all these are valid and different ways of pointing people to Jesus. And what we need is a blend of these sorts of approaches as we go forwards, because the variety of approaches will reach different people. And in reality, all these different approaches, they sort of merge into each other. Is Superstars attractional, or is it actually something more emergent? It's hard to tell at the moment. It's developing. We'll see how it continues to develop over the coming years. And having a blend of mission is messy. And if I'm honest, I'd far rather it was all nice and neat and ordered. But actually, as our society and our culture gets more and more diverse, we need to diversify the models of mission that we use. And so it's quite deliberate that things are getting more messy. It's deliberate so that we reach more people with the gospel. And of course the gospel message stays the same, but it's our way of engaging people and expressing the gospel message which changes. And so that's what I mean by a blended approach to mission. And one of the tasks for our new PCC is going to be sort of further refining our vision as we sort of adopt this blended approach to mission. And another of the challenges will be thinking, okay, well, how does this blended approach to mission fit with our overseas mission responsibilities as well? Because that is a major part of what the Lord calls us to do, not just Shirley or Southampton, but the whole world is our remit. And this sort of blended approach very much fits with what the Diocese of Winchester are asking us to do at the moment, and the Church of England nationally. Some dioceses, it's about 10% of people who go to Anglican congregations, they're fresh expressions of church. And so things like Superstars are absolutely in line with the way the Church of England as a whole is moving. And this diocese is actively encouraging us to experiment with different models of mission and different ways of doing church. So I hope that sort of makes sense and just begins to chart a course for us and begins to explain some of the variety of stuff that's going on and how it does fit together, even though it can seem a bit confusing at times. But for now, I think it'd be great to begin hearing some updates from some of the different mission groups that we've got in operation at the moment. We're going to watch a couple of videos, one now and then one later on after the break. I want to apologise for the very poor quality of sound on these videos. We had great trouble recording them and producing them and so on. We've subtitled them, so hopefully you will be able to at least read what people are saying, even though I know you won't be able to hear everything. And maybe the key thing here is that we're experimenting with how best to communicate the gospel. It is experimenting. And so we're asking people, what have you tried over the last year? And what have you been learning? Because as we try different things, we're going to make mistakes. We're not always going to get it right. But of course, the only failure is the time when we fail to learn. And so I don't mind us experimenting and it not looking as though it's working. I do mind if we don't experiment And I do mind if we don't learn when things don't go quite as we hope they would. And so we need to be learning and sharing this learning amongst us. You know, Christ's love compels us, the Bible says. And if we're not being compelled out into mission, then that's a sign that Christ's love isn't captivating our hearts as he would want it to be. So, Victor, I think, is playing with the technology at the back. Here we go. Here's a mission update.